Hi, this is Jason from Effective Dashboards, helping maintenance and reliability professionals get the most out of Power BI. So welcome back to another video. In this video, we'll be looking at the maps visual. So I'll be talking you through how to set up the maps visual, how to configure it, and then how to, or examples of when you might want to use one and when an alternative option might be better. Okay, so let's get started. So we're just going to dive straight in. These two visuals here are what we're going to be focusing on today. So the map visual and the map, or the filled map visual. So I'm going to open this up and we're just going to create a little bit of space for ourselves here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just look at our data set here. So we've got backlog data. So let's have a quick look at that backlog data. So we've got locations. So we've got 5 locations: China, India, UK, US and South Africa. Each location is split by critical and non-critical data and work orders, and we've got a aggregated number of work orders and the aggregated number of man hours in our backlog. It's a maintenance backlog, so overdue work essentially. So let's go and add in a location to begin with. So we can see here that we've got this list of fields here. We've got a location, so that's obviously important for us to identify on the map what location it is we're interested in. So I've got a location here. However, that location is a country. Now, when it comes to certain types of data, Power BI allows you to specifically or explicitly tell the Power BI report that this is a particular part of an address or a longitude or latitude. So let's go in here. It's uncategorized at the moment. We want to explicitly call this location a country. Okay, so it's a bit of metadata just to say that that location is a country. I'm going to do that, and then once I've done that, I'm going to pull it into this location field. And straight away we can see we've got the locations identified here. Okay, now at the moment there's just a little bit of a circle there that's showing you where that location is. But straight away we can see we've got China, we've got India, we've got South Africa, we've got the UK, and we've got the US there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull in a size. Okay, so we can identify, or we can use a measure to determine the size and relative size of each one of these circles. So let's use our number of work orders. So backlog work orders is the measure we're going to use here. I'm going to pull it into size. And now we can see we've added in a little bit of extra size here. So we can quickly see that it looks like there's a lot in China, there's a lot in South Africa. UK is relatively low. That's somewhere in between, and America's probably looks like it's the second lowest there. Okay, so we're starting to kind of build a picture with the size. So that's the first thing you can do, is set up a size. The next thing is looking at the legend. Okay, so the legend, we'll come to latitude and longitude later, but we've got this location here. Latitude and longitude actually are more important when you've got a location that hasn't got an address. Okay, and you want to really specifically identify that location by its coordinates, essentially, its global coordinates. And that's really useful if you've got, for example, in the industry I work in, which is oil and gas, we've got oil rigs that are in the North Sea, so they're not going to be next to anywhere, or if they are, they're going to be just basically next to someplace in the UK. If we want to see that specific location, we need to specifically put in a longitude and latitude, and that would then allow it to be shown at sea, or if it's in a remote area like a desert or whatever. So just a little bit in longitude and latitude there. Okay, so the legend. Now this is why I put in the type of work. So I'm going to split that type, and you can see what it's done. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Is it has split the legend into a pie chart. Okay, so this is critical and non-critical work. So if I hover over here, we can see that type is critical. In China, we've got 10, and then we've got 28 that's non-critical. Okay, so we'll lose the total, but we get a split by critical and non-critical in a pie chart, which isn't really particularly that useful in my opinion. It's okay, I guess, in here because we don't have a lot of data points and we don't have a lot of different categories. We've only got 2, and if it is important to understand the split, then yeah, that's fine. My only issue I've got is that the pie charts get really small as the size of the pie reduces, and will get big as the size of the pie increases because we've also linked it to size. Okay, if we took size out of that, we're just going to get, it's just going to split 50-50 because it doesn't realise, it does not understand how we're going to be slicing that data. So we do need to have that measure, that size in there. So let's add it back in. Okay, so let's go through some of the sort of basic settings here. We've got some data. We've split it by critical and non-critical, and we've got the size of the actual circle attached to the number of work orders and backlog. So legend is on. Now we can switch that legend off or on at the top here. So I think probably wise to leave it on. It might even be useful to go and change that legend, change that color, legend type to, oh, we'll change it once we go into the split. Yeah, so we can split that data colors. Here's it here, and we might want to change critical to be red. Just identify that these are the red ones. Let's just make another a redder red to the top here. Okay, so you can set it up, and that just gives a little bit of indication about what's critical and non-critical. So setting up the data colors is one thing you can do. Now you can use conditional formatting to set up the data colors, but you can't use it if you're using a legend. Okay, now we're going to do that in a second, but you can't use conditional formatting if you're using a legend. You've got to either use the built-in allocation that will be based on your the colors that you've built in your template, or you can explicitly say what colors are going to be, like I've just done there. Next we've got category, so that's going to be on for such a small number of data points. I'm going to put that on for sure, and that's going to help us just really easily see China, India, South Africa, UK and US. You can change the different setup in the background, you can change the transparency, the background color, you can change the color itself if you want to change it, and the size. So all the usual stuff here is available, but I'm going to actually just leave it as it is for the moment. Next we've got bubbles. So this bubble size, it's set at -10. So this is the relative size, essentially. Now I'm not 100% sure why it's set at -10, but if you can get it bigger or smaller, and it'll just depend on how much real estate you're using and what your data looks like and how much you want to emphasize it. So if I just set that to 0, that looks a little bit better. Okay, so we can see that that's now a slightly bigger size. So it's really just, I don't know what the number actually represents. It was set at -10 as a default, but I've set it to 0, and you can just use a slider just to make it the size that you're interested in and is relevant to your visual. Map controls. So we've got no map controls just now. It's set up for auto zoom, which I'm going to leave it at, but if you did want to go and add in some zoom, put auto zoom off, you need to add the zoom buttons in. Okay, now it sort of scrolls it round. So we can see here, we've gone from straight off the east, straight from across the west coast here or the east coast of China, the east coast of Asia, and we're back in North America here. So I would say that use the auto zoom, and it just makes it a little bit easier, and you just kind of see the information in a bit of a it saves you a bit mess about with these zoom buttons. Now you can leave them on and off as well if you want to override the auto zoom, which is fine. And then there's this lasso button. Now this allows you to go and select, just put it on, allows you to go and select a couple of areas here. And if you've got some cross highlighting going on, I'll just quickly show you that. So say for example I wanted to add in just a simple card, and I just wanted to add in, say, the backlog hours here. Okay, and I wanted to just, you can select these and it would add up, but if you want to use this lasso, just let me click on here, and then it just allows you to select, say for example you just want to select these, and here we can see we've got everything selected there. Okay, so that's what that lasso is. So it's worth having if that's going to be a consideration. So if you're going to be doing a little bit of cross highlighting, then activate that lasso button there. Okay. So working down here, map controls, the geoculture, I'm not 100% sure what that does. When I put it on, all it seemed to do was recenter it. So I'm going to just leave it at auto for just now because I'm happy enough with that. Let's go to map style. Now I do like to change this. So just now we've got a road style on. You can do an aerial map, which I think is probably not that particularly great because it's going to make it difficult for you to actually see the data points because there's so much colour there. As pretty as it is. Road map. Mine's, well, you can get a light map there, which is the default. Wasn't the default, it was road map was the default. But I actually like this grayscale. I think it just puts the map in the background, and it means that we're focusing in on the actual values themselves. Okay, so I prefer to use the grayscale if I'm going to use a map. Now, just a little word at the side here. I've never used a map before in any of the maintenance and reliability reports I've done. I've never really seen a need for it. However, it doesn't mean to say that it's not something that is a consideration, and we're going to talk about it as we go through here. I think a map is generally suited when there's logistics at play in the locations, and the distances between the locations are something that you're interested in, and something that can influence the actions you're going to take to maybe improve a KPI. So the rest of the stuff, the title, the background, all of the other bits and pieces in here are pretty much the same as all the other visuals. Okay, so they're all available. You can change the colours, you can change what it says in the title, etc. So I'm not going to spend too much time on these because every visual's the same. Right, okay, so that is the first one, the first example there. The next example is where we're going to take away the actual category and we're going to use colour to represent another dimension. So this one here is colour and size. So I've got this here which I don't need. Just remove that. And let's go and just make this slightly bigger here. And I'm going to, oh, it zooms on, that's fine. Okay, so this one here, it's the same data set. So the same 5 data points. I've got the location. I'm going to use the work order number for the size. But I'm also going to use a colour dimension here to represent the number of actual man hours. Okay, so we can look at 2 dimensions. One, the size of the circle, and the second is the actual colour of the circle. So if I now go in, it's setting at red just now, but if I go in here, and we can see we can use, there's a little FX button here. Okay, I've cleared it off just now. You can put a default colour in here, but I'm going to use this FX button here, and that's going to open up the conditional formatting. There we go. Now I'm just going to use the values that are here. So we're going to use a colour scale. Now you could use rules, and you could use a measure if you want, but I'm going to use a colour scale because that's fine. And based on field, there's not going to be a count of locations because that's not going to give us anything. What I'm going to do is base it on the backlog man hours, which is this one here. So the lowest is going to be white, the highest is going to be red, and everything else looks fine. So now we can see we've got a slightly different view on life. So first of all, I think I'm going to change this so the lowest is not going to be white because it actually makes it hard to see that. So let's go back in and just change that. So I think I'm going to have the lowest as being maybe a lighter blue colour. There we go, that's better. So we can see straight away that the biggest backlog in man hours is probably South Africa. US is quite high, UK is lower, India is the lowest, and Asia is probably somewhere in between, or China somewhere in between. So another little bit of best practice here is if you are going to colour something, then you do need to make sure that there's that value is listed in the tooltip at least. So let's go and add in the backlog man hours in the tooltip. And now we can see, okay, so 305, 145, and here we've got 369. Okay, so we can see the colours now representing the actual number of man hours in backlog, and the size is the actual number of work orders in backlog. So that is using that. We can't use a legend if that's the case. If I try and use a legend here, it's just going to tell you can't use it. Okay, so we'll take that legend out. So it's either one or the other. You've got a legend that can split it into that little pie chart we did in the previous example, or if you choose to, you can use the size and you can use a color, some conditional formatting to add a color to it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is this one here, which is this filled map. Okay, so here's an example that we've got. Now I've actually changed this slightly, and this is now representing the color is representing the number of work orders in backlog. Okay, so that red color there is representing the number of work orders. So in India we've got 29, in China we've got 38, and in South Africa we've got 41. Now this is where I want to just demonstrate the issue that this shows, is that that land area, and that's a big chunk of red. Okay, now the colour's roughly the same because the number of work orders 41 and 38 are roughly the same. So on the scale where we've got UK, which is, you know, you can't really see the UK because it's down there at number 15. In fact, actually, let's just change this slightly. Again, I'm going to make it so that it's a blue at the bottom. Now it's going to mess this up a little bit. But yeah, we can see it slightly easier. We can see that. We could probably play about with it and choose something even better. But yeah, the issue we've got is if you've got two areas that are roughly the same colour, your eye is automatically drawn to the larger area, in China in this case, and thinking that's more significant than South Africa. And it might even be more significant if it's a smaller country. I mean, I've just chosen South Africa there, which is, you know, it's small, but there's definitely smaller countries. So that's something you've got to be careful about if you're using this filled map. I would probably never use this from a maintenance and reliability point of view. I can't really see how it would be anything where we'd want to be able to fill a whole map with a KPI that comes to mind. It's more of a geopolitical type thing, looking at maybe population, or looking at how people are voting, or particular things that are related to the whole country. Okay, so yeah, that's another option there, but probably would never use it. I just wanted to show you it so that you can see that it's available. Okay, so the final option is going to be the heat map. So you can actually add a heat map onto a map. Okay, and yeah, I guess it's probably where the heat maps originated from, hence the word map. And what we've got is a different data set here just to demonstrate it. I've got refining capacity across the UK, so these are the locations of refineries, and we can see that the refining capacity is represented by a circle, and we've linked the size to the actual circle. Okay, so we can see there this capacity for each plant. So we've got some big plants here, and we've got some locations, like this is Essex, which has got 2 plants in it, and this is this one here, we've got a couple of plants here as well up in Cheshire. So we can see that there is some additional capacity there, and it's kind of overlapped on top of each other. Now it's difficult to see that total capacity, and this is where a heat map would come in. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to this heat map option here. It wasn't available before because we used this legend. If you've got a legend in here, then the heat map's not going to be available. So let's turn it on. So what it's basically doing is taking 2 options. It's got a radius. You draw a radius. So each heat map is a fixed radius. Okay, so at the moment we've got this set up for meters. You can set it up for pixels. Now if you set it up for meters, it's generally speaking more suited to something that has got an effect, and a decaying effect over a distance. So for example, you might have, I don't know, maybe you've got some contamination, an industrial accident, you've got some contamination, and you want to see it dispersing over the radius. But we're going to use it anyway, just so you can see how it could be used in maybe like a maintenance and reliability type thing. So we can see capacity there, and the darker the capacity in the middle here, the darker the circle, particularly in the middle, and then extending out, the more capacity there is. And it kind of is pretty intuitive. We can see there's quite a bit of capacity there. Let's just make it a lot easier. I'm going to go and turn the labels off. Okay, just so we can see. And it starts to makes sense that, you know, there's a little bit more capacity here, there's some here, there's some here, and then it kind of dies off and there's a little bit less up at the top in Scotland. So that's how it works. You can actually make this radius a little bit bigger if you want to. Okay, so if it needs to be a little bit bigger, then it can be. Now you can also set up the radius to be in pixels, and what that will actually do is it'll, in fact actually let's go back to the pixels and we'll just put it at maybe 10, and that'll get bigger or smaller depending on the scale that you've got. Okay, so if you're looking at it on a global scale, it might be more important to look at it in pixels, and it probably is in this example here a better option to use pixels, albeit we'll probably, you know, set that to maybe 30, so that when we zoom right in, yeah, because otherwise, like I say, if you've set it up so that it is in meters, 30 meters isn't going to be a lot. Let's put it into maybe 100 kilometers. Then it's really looking at an effect over the period, over the distance, and how that effect decays over that distance. So yeah, a heat map, you can see where the big clumps of capacity are. You can go and change and play about with this 50, this 0, the 50 and the 100% gradient if you need to, and that'll just change these colours here. But for just now, I think that's enough just to be able to see this heat map and see it in action. So hopefully you've got a flavour of how to set up a map, how to use it. You know, there's some pros and cons. I mean, a map takes up a lot of space, so in that instance it's not particularly useful, but it is useful in these examples here that we used earlier on. People are used to using a map, so if you're able just to say, well, okay, well I know this is, and if you're using an audience that's savvy with locations, and particularly international locations, or even locations within their own country, because you can use it on a country basis, it can often be a lot easier to compare regions and areas and continents on a map than it can be on an actual bar chart. That said, if you've got a lower number of values like we've got here, then, you know, creating a bar chart and just showing them as a bar chart is going to be, you know, it doesn't have the wow factor, but how much wow factor is there going to be? Well, having looked at a map for the 50th, the 100th, the 150th time, where basically here we can see that, you know, pretty clearly South Africa and China are the sort of top two, then we've got India in the middle, and then we've got the US and UK is the lowest. I mean, it's dead straightforward and easy, and you don't even need to look at it to see that. So often it can be easier to use one of these column charts, or even one of these ones here, one of these bar charts, so that you can, you know, you can read that a little bit easier if it's on its side. And of course you can add in the data labels, etc. Just to add it to make it a bit more explicit. So a map is good, however I would use it as, if it's only really if geographical location is really, really important. In a lot of instances, if we're looking at locations for plants, manufacturing plants, from a maintenance point of view, each plant's probably going to be different. So normally I would definitely use one of these bar charts or column charts. However, if you're a manager and you want to be able to see your capacity across a region, or across a continent, or across the globe, then a map's definitely going to be something that you could be looking at. Okay, so again, thanks for listening. Hopefully you'll be able to find this useful and get something out of this video. It's one of these ones that's it's gone on a bit, so I'm not going to talk for too much longer. But if you did like it, I'd appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. That would help me out a lot. If you want to keep up to date with the latest videos, as always, then hit the subscribe button if you're finding this for the first time, and you'll get a notification every time I release a video, which is about once a week. Okay, so thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next video.